Thanks for listening to the ArtTactic Podcast. I'm your host, Adam Green. It feels like AI has taken over nearly every dinner conversation, right up there with politics and a handful of other topics. How it's being used, how it'll impact the job market, and ultimately, what does it mean for the future? Interestingly, the conversation around AI's impact on the art world, though, hasn't been as prominent. Maybe that's because the art world has a reputation for lagging behind when it comes to adopting new technologies. But that may not actually be the case with AI. We dig into that further as we're joined today by Callum Hale-Thomson, founder of First Thursday, a platform that helps galleries turn collector interactions into lasting relationships. Callum and his team recently released the AI in Galleries report, which is an insightful look at how galleries around the world are approaching AI today. The report's available for free right now on First Thursday's website. I definitely recommend you download it and read it. In the episode, we talk about what motivated the report and how it came together, some of the most surprising findings, including the high percentage of gallery professionals already using AI, and how the tools are actually being used in practice. We also dig into some of the more complex questions around AI in the art world, from concerns around client confidentiality to why fears of job displacement may not be playing out in the art world like they are in the broader economy. Hope you enjoy the conversation. Thanks so much for listening. Callum, thanks so much for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So as I mentioned, it feels like AI is being discussed at almost every dinner conversation. It's being utilized to varying degrees by everyone. Yet, interestingly, it really hasn't come up in conversation much within the art world, which is really why I was fascinated by the report that you released. Before we get into some of the details of the report, tell us what motivated you to create the report. How did you go about putting it together? Who did you speak with? How many galleries were involved, and over what time frame?
Absolutely. So, like with most of our research here at First Thursday, it started really from a place of personal curiosity. And so when I first set up First Thursday back in early 2024, it was actually only a few months after the first public version of ChatGPT had been released to the market. I remember the models back then were pretty basic, right? You could generate silly images, you could get it to write stories, nursery rhymes. But it hadn't at that point really become something commonplace, both for us as consumers, but also integrated into businesses as well. And as I was doing my early research for First Thursday, which involved lots of time watching gallerists using database systems, clicking around, I'd ask them, have you ever thought about using AI for some of this? Or what do you think about AI? And the most common reaction was often disgust. I think everyone still thought of AI as something that was going to replace artists or have massive issues with plagiarism and topics like that. I think there's also a huge amount of resentment after the burn of the NFT movement and all those other technological innovations that didn't always show up for the art market. And so over the last 2 years building up this product, I guess it feels like two really important things have happened. One is AI has now become completely integrated into fabric of our lives, right? So both personally, I think before this chat, I was looking at, I think over 1 billion people have now used ChatGPT, which is insane thinking about how recently it was launched. But also how it's now super common inside work context. Like inside most industries, it's being used on a day-to-day basis. Employers are being required to use AI as part of their day-to-day work. And I think just for us as beings in the world, like AI is becoming second nature. Like I'm someone who grew up just as Google was taking off. And I really remember, Googling becoming a verb and all of that becoming really part of how we use the internet and how we discover information. The new generations who are graduating high school and university now are going straight to these models. So there's this huge transformation that's happened. In amongst all of this, something kind of curious started happening as I was going to art fairs, going to galleries, doing my research. And I started seeing that little OpenAI logo on gallery staff's phones a lot. Often it was next to, their art products and their other tools they were using to run their business. And I started to see more examples potentially of texts being written using AI, of galleries doing things like, producing press releases, drafting emails, things like this. And I got very curious about, if you have a generation of people working inside galleries who are living, breathing AI basically in every other part of their lives. There must be some overlap, some bleed into how they use it at work. But on the other side, Adam, as you mentioned, right, most of the art market has stayed silent about how it's actually being adopted. And so I thought there might be a tension there. And I think the findings of this report really showed that there absolutely is. So we set out actually at the start of this year to put together this kind of moment in time analysis. And we really hope this will become a longitudinal piece. So every year we plan on repeating this research across similar lines, trying to chart adoption as it grows. For this report, we spoke to 103 professionals during February and early March. Most of these were kind of online conversations, surveys, and we had some very kind partners who helped us to reach a really wide range of different gallerists to really get the best insight. I think what we really wanted to focus on is having a balanced view. So about a third of the respondents were kind of owner-founders of galleries. About a third were mid-level and director-level staff, and then about a third were junior. And I think that's really important for the insights we delivered, because I think there's a lot of intergenerational tension, especially with regards to kind of usage of and attitudes towards AI itself. And, again, a lot of our galleries we spoke to were UK and European based, but a strong contingent also came from North America and to a lesser extent Asia as well. So although, again, 100 is not every gallery in the world, we did want to have a really balanced view of how this is impacting galleries of all sizes and across all different locations.
And so one of the headline stats from your report is that 84% of gallery professionals are already using AI. Now, with the proliferation of AI, honestly, I imagine that number is already outdated and even higher than it was when you published a report. But what are the most common ways that gallery professionals are actually utilizing AI in the art world?
So what I think is really interesting about the adoption we saw through this report is how I think it actually does mirror how AI has been adopted across wider consumer use cases and other businesses, right? The early use cases for AI have predominantly been around basically writing, editing, translating, things to do with words that usually be very time consuming and that AI models can do pretty effectively at speed. So we found out that, nearly 8 in 10 of the people who said they use AI regularly are using it for writing composition tasks. These are, press releases, artist buyers, emails to collectors, the collateral that really can be incredibly time consuming to produce if you're doing it fully manually. And actually, as an aside, whilst we were putting out this research, we did a bit of a side quest into understanding, actually how widespread across gallery outputs is the use of AI. And I screened 100 press releases from a sample of 100 galleries in London. We found out that at least 40% of them had a high level of AI usage in even their most recent published press releases. So I thought it was interesting to compare what we're seeing in terms of people's own, confessions, descriptions of their own use case, but also what's happening, I guess, actually in the public sphere, and how comfortable, I would say, entire galleries are about placing content that's been generated or heavily influenced with AI out into the wider public area. I think one thing that was interesting was, no one really spoke about using anything specialist in the art market. I mean, that doesn't necessarily surprise me because there aren't many tools out there that are building in this space. But also how things like image generation, research were still relatively low down the list. I think these are probably the areas where there's the greatest sensitivity when it comes to adopting AI, especially in creative and artistic circles. And so it's quite interesting to see those, I guess, deprioritized in favor of, more traditional writing tasks.
Now, another finding in your report that I found incredibly fascinating is how gallery professionals are thinking about AI and what are their top concerns surrounding it. Now, I think in the broader public, much of the AI conversation has centered around job loss, and we have seen major companies reduce their headcount because of AI, and when that does occur, that's major headlines and it's reported on and everyone's seeing it. Interestingly, within the art world, the gallery professionals that you polled, they don't seem to be as concerned about job loss. Why do you think that is?
Yeah, this one really surprised me. It was actually the 7th most selected option. So it was one of the least the least significant concerns we found from this particular sample. And actually, people were twice as likely to say they were concerned about accuracy or privacy or ethics over job loss specifically. And I was reflecting on this. I think really there's probably 3 key reasons why this specific phenomenon is being seen in the art market. Because I think if you go into most other industries, job loss, there are many tech companies who are already using AI as a reason for mass layoffs. We're hearing a lot about it in the media, and I think it is a real concern in other spaces. I think the three things that I was really considering were, firstly, many of the dominant skills that make art professionals successful and great, I think, are things that AI is going to really struggle to replicate. In other sectors, right, you're seeing entire job categories and roles just stop out. Maybe most infamously in tech, you have the whole range of AI salespeople with synthetic voices that can call you up and try and sell you products, right? I don't see that happening in the art market anytime soon, because it's an industry that runs fundamentally on personal relationships, taste, connoisseurship, discretion. And I think for that reason, there are still really significant skills that the market values and that will need to still be done by people if this market is going to succeed. I think the second part is that actually, in order for AI to have an impact on hiring and on job loss, there needs to be a big workforce to begin with. And actually, I think compared to other, again, comparable industries, similar turnovers, teams in the art market are already pretty lean and often relatively small compared to their turnover. And so again, whilst I think a lot of these tools, I almost hope a lot of these tools will free up some of these teams to work on higher leverage activities, to focus more on those human relationships, on selling, on engaging new collectors rather than just admin. There isn't much fat to cut. So actually, I think, again, you probably can't afford to lose your gallery assistant because they're still doing so much that actually an AI can't replace. And I think it'll be a long time before we really see that happening. I think the final part was actually looking at what this adoption really looks like in the art market. And the way I'd coin it is that it's pretty wide, right? We saw that 84% of people using AI for work, but it's not especially deep. People are still scratching the surface. This is still individuals experimenting with mostly publicly available consumer chatbots, simple writing tasks, the kind of bread and butter of AI that it's been very able to do for a number of years. And so I think this is the biggest kind of question mark that came out of the survey. It's like, what does this question of job loss look like in a world where AI is a lot more advanced, has much better context, is actually fully integrated into gallery systems? And I think until we see wider adoption across all seniorities of galleries, and we see the welcoming of AI, I guess, by gallery owners as well, I think that kind of remains to be proven out.
Yeah, I think this aspect of it will be really interesting to monitor and see how it plays out over the next few years. As you mentioned, a lot of galleries are small businesses with not a lot of headcount already, but in particular, I think about the big auction houses. I think about even outside of the art market, large institutions, and you do have to wonder if there will be some job loss or at least changing roles as a result of the impact of AI. Now, another interesting element about AI is the fact that a lot of usage of AI is happening through personal AI accounts. You touch on this in the report, which does raise concerns around client confidentiality and pricing data. Of course, the art world, like some of these other topics, isn't alone in this. A lot of people are uploading confidential and sensitive data into AI already. I'm wondering, has there been any meaningful oversight or best practices that have emerged from galleries about how their staff should be using AI or how they're managing this risk, given how important client confidentiality and other types of pricing data are within the art world?
Not that we've come across. I mean, I think in the survey, we saw under 10% of respondents said that their gallery had any form of policy in place to guard how AI should be used. And that's just a policy level. That's not even kind of, accounts provided to teams with appropriate mission security and much, much more. And I think, Adam, you're right. There's kind of two interesting factors that I think are driving this almost like experimental deployment of AI in the art market. Because I think as someone who is, building technology for the art market, I myself have been surprised by how rapidly AI has been adopted in an industry that is famously, and I think quite rightly, seen as a slow adopter of new innovation, especially for software and other technologies. And for me, I think this really comes down to the nature in which AI is being used. So this isn't an industry that where I would say this adoption is being led from the top. We're not in the whole seeing senior directors of galleries, gallery owners saying to their teams, you must use AI. Here are the frameworks, here are the structures, here's how it's going to grow our business. It's much more organic. what we're seeing are gallery staff, often more junior gallery staff, using AI in every part of their day-to-day lives, using it to order groceries or organize their days or get fitness help or anything like that. And then coming into work, doing the same sorts of tasks they might do in their personal life, being told they shouldn't be using AI and thinking, well, but what if I just did? What if I could do that press release in 15 minutes and edit it and make it exceptional instead of spending 3 hours like I usually do? And I think we're seeing this kind of slow experimentation that is, in many cases, unauthorized, hidden, not really spoken about, partially because of, I think, the stigma of AI more widely in the industry. And I think until we see leadership inside these galleries first accept this is happening, which I'm hoping this report will begin the journey of doing, and secondly, like facing in some guardrails, I think it's going to be a risk because there are very simple things that teams can do to even safeguard their use. You can make sure that you've switched off the use of your personal data in a chatbot for training models. In most models, this is on by default. I would always recommend that everyone switches it off. It's a simple toggle. But more widely, galleries should think about providing gallery level accounts that have strict data processing agreements that ensure data is not brought out of the jurisdiction of the gallery, that ensures that it's not used for model training without permission. And I think there's just one final bit of upside there as well, which is individual chatbots without the context of what the gallery is are only going to do so much of a good job. And really the best deployments of AI that I've personally seen across other segments are where the businesses in question actually invest in building out AI components for their teams that really understand and know how the business works and what they're prioritizing. And that means that, if a gallery was to want to use AI for press releases, it wouldn't be that individual going to their own ChatGPT subscription, to explain tone of voice, chucking like personal information in. That information would already be in a safe gallery instance, ready for use, which will make things much more effective, much faster, and much more efficient, I would say, for those teams as well.
Yeah, I think implementing some types of oversight and best practices would be incredibly helpful. Funny enough, I feel like even outside of the art world, just thinking about the broader public, there is a growing feeling, it seems like, that AI and technology simply has all of our data already. We've uploaded so much on the internet and the cloud, and people are using AI and different things to transmit data into it that I feel like there's a growing feeling of I can just give up because honestly, this technology has everything already anyway. So who cares about confidentiality?
Yeah, well, exactly. And I think this is where this is what's so fascinating to me about the art market, which is a space, quite rightly, that is very hot on data security, data protection. Like I know many galleries that even today don't have their database connected to the internet because of the fear of cyber attacks and the need to protect and preserve their client data and invoice data, on their own servers. And these same galleries, right, are galleries in which junior staff or mid-level staff are using ChatGPT and using models that are showing that information publicly. So it's this kind of crazy disconnect that's going on that I think has been brought to the fore just because of the rapid adoption of these tools. But I mean, I hope it doesn't get to the point where we have a breach somewhere or, a kind of wider story about how damaging this should be, because I think, fundamentally, there just needs to be more education about what putting information into a chatbot means and how it's retained.
And so from your conversations, how do gallery staff actually feel about using AI? You spoke previously about how the threat of job loss isn't a primary concern for them, but overall, do you get a sense if there's a strong level of excitement and maybe even empowerment to be able to do more on an individual level with AI? Or is it more hesitation and possibly even concern about using it and more generally its proliferation?
I think people are definitely not excited. I think it's kind of a guarded enthusiasm, if I was being optimistic. I think one of the main questions we asked actually was around like the complexity of gallery work and how, whether or not running your galleries become more difficult over the last few years, whether you've got more tasks to complete, more admin. And 80% of the people we spoke to said absolutely. And you can see that everywhere, right? You can see that in the recent UBS Art Basel report about how many more art fairs there are now per year than in previous years. You can see that, the number of online channels, the complexity of these art businesses is not going away. And so where we see AI usage at the moment, I think it's coming from a place of like, I'm overwhelmed and I need things that can help me. And if they can help me, that's great. But I don't think it's kind of a carte blanche, excitement about what this technology could do. It's more about how can it get me back to a good position to focus on the things I care about. I also think this is an area where the responses were most bifurcated. So obviously there are people who have already adopted AI in their systems, in their teams, are very happy, see the efficiencies, are excited to see how AI will continue to evolve and make their business easier to run. And there are people who are absolutely adamant that they will never touch it. We asked a lot of kind of open text questions and let people, really share their views, their minds, and you can see those actually pulled out in the report itself. We heard very passionate tirades against any use of AI as well, which I think will continue. And I can even think of, I was finding myself yesterday about to use AI to write an email, and then decided, no, I'm actually going to write this by hand. And it reminded me of actually how pleasurable it can be to kind of take a step away from these models and actually think about what's really going to make a difference in your business. And I think that's a sentiment that we saw really, reflected across most of the galleries we spoke to.
And so you've had the opportunity to collate all this data, speak with many people in the art world about their views on AI and how they're using it. So I think you have a really valuable and unique perspective to be able to look into the future. Right now, most use cases are fairly practical, as you touched on, writing press releases or maybe catalogs, translation, more administrative tasks. Where do you see AI potentially going next, and what should galleries be paying attention to over the next couple of years?
I'm very skeptical that AI will transform a lot of the outward-facing components of galleries, right? So how they put together their program, how they deal with collectors and with advisors, how they attend art fairs. Like, so much of the fundamental, successes of the art market come from those human interactions, from those behaviors. So I think it's very unlikely we're going to see, an AI gallery or AI algorithms that are going to suggest work and that sort of stuff. I think the dynamics of this industry is such that actually it will be a long time, I believe, until, or if ever, that technology can supplant a lot of that work. I think what's more likely to happen is we're going to see AI bury deeper into some of the more complex inner workings of the art market. I think it's kind of two areas that I'm especially interested in. One, I have more of a vested interest in than the other. The first one is around shipping and logistics. I think that's a space where there's a huge amount of paper-based documentation, lots of very custom requirements, lots of hand-holding and handoffs between different people, different individuals, different businesses. And it's exactly the space, I think, where AI can produce customized enough workflows to really help make a system like that much more efficient. I had to ship something to the US about a year ago, a painting, and it was a total nightmare to actually get the quote, find the right price, do the shipping logistics. I think it took 8 people in an email chain. So I definitely think areas like that are really human capital intensive. Interestingly, one of the highest costs for a gallery, their people, are the areas where I think AI will have the biggest impact. And I think the second part, and this is more linked to the work we do at First Thursday, is going to be around, I think, all of the text and communications and basically data that galleries hold about their people and about the artworks that they've sold or have in their collections. And the reason for this is, up until now, to really work with information in the art market, it's had to be categorized into databases and files and have a certain structure. And then you can run searches across it. And I think what AI is doing is building the ability to actually bring together a lot of this data and also search across it. So instead of having to do data migrations, which everyone hates, or, copy things from pen and paper into systems and tag things, AI can do a lot of this for us instantly. And so, maybe there's someone who said they liked an artist 3 years ago who they emailed you about, and you just never put them into your client database. Well, with AI, you can probably search through your email inbox in 5 seconds to find that person. And that could be someone who becomes a future sales lead, buys a work from you. So I think it's going to really unlock a lot of the forgotten labor and cumbersome labor that comes with the admin side of galleries. I really hope that brings about commercial potential, commercial success. But yeah, I don't see the first AI. We're seeing the first AI law firms, the first accounting firms, and I don't think we'll see the first AI gallery anytime soon.
Yeah, well, this is all going to be really interesting, and we'll all be watching and participating as we see how AI continues to transform how galleries operate. Callum, thanks so much again for joining us and sharing your really unique perspective on AI's implementation already into the art world and where things may be headed into the future. If our listeners haven't already, I definitely encourage them to download and read your report, which is available on your website for free. Can you share the website URL so our listeners can find it?
Absolutely. So it's first-thursday.com, and you'll see a banner at the top of the page. And from there, you can download the report and have a read for yourself.
Perfect. Thanks so much again, Callum. We appreciate you joining us.
Thanks for having me. That was great.